The Galactic Fleet had no equal. Its banners stretched across 1,000 systems. Its ships cut through nebulae like scalpels through silk, and its officers carried themselves with the certainty of law-made flesh. When the councils spoke, stars seemed to shift their orbits. The fleet was order. It was discipline. It was inevitability. And yet, for all their technology, all their steel and rituals of command, every species that wore the fleet's insignia carried the same shadow in its bones. Black holes. They called them many things. The mouths of the void. The silent fangs. The eaters of light. In the crystalline chronicles of the Orisk Confederacy, they were written only in negative glyphs, blank spaces in otherwise flawless lattice. The Serpentiform navigators told hatchlings that black holes were the original predators, devouring even time itself. The Mirror Choir claimed their gods had vanished into such an abyss, and to even gaze on one was to risk being seen back. These weren't just hazards on star charts. They were cultural scars. Pilots would perform gestures before long jumps if their course angled near one. Officers who prided themselves on logic would lower their voices at mention. Even the great fleet's war anthems shifted key when the subject came close, sliding into minor chords. Black holes were reminders that there were still places discipline could not reach. So when the Council ordered the fleet to stage near the Maw of Asterion, even admirals shivered. The Maw wasn't the largest singularity catalogued, not even close, but it was close enough to the border, and close enough to Zorath space, that its reputation grew monstrous in the telling. Its event horizon shimmered like oil across a black pearl, surrounded by a halo of wrecks, dead ships that had strayed too close. Some swore you could still hear distress calls from within the static if you tuned the bands right. And that was where the combined fleet chose to make its stand. The strategy chamber was a cathedral of glass and steel, suspended at the heart of a dreadnought whose bones creaked with the weight of command. Tiered seats fanned around a central dais where a holographic projection of the Maw twisted in impossible light. Delegates perched, coiled, or floated according to anatomy, eyes fixed on the rendering. No matter how advanced their optics, the Maw always looked the same, a wound in the universe that refused to heal. "This is the operational perimeter," droned Admiral Krell, his 6 mandibles clicking on every hard consonant. His species wore metals as piercings, each one threaded through the shell like an accusation. "We will hold formation here, 22 degrees above the plane. Our drives will not exceed threshold burn. Under no circumstances will ships cross this line." The holographic map bloomed with a faint blue arc, safely distant from the singularities' swirl. Murmurs of agreement circled the chamber, relief bleeding through discipline. They were warriors, yes, but they were not fools. To tempt a black hole was to tempt erasure. And then she walked in. The doors parted with an unnecessary hiss, and the fleet got a lesson in what real fearlessness looked like. Vera Vortex strolled into the chamber like it belonged to her, jacket slung across one shoulder, hips moving to some private rhythm, her black hair catching light and glinting blue with each step. Victory rolls framed her face, unapologetically vintage, as if she had walked out of an old Earth recruitment poster. Her mouth wore red like it was daring the galaxy to argue. Whispers erupted instantly, unprotocoled, unchecked. "That's her, the pilot from Draconis. She's alive? I heard her ship broke apart." No, she flew it back in pieces." "She's human. What did you expect?" Vera drank it in like perfume. She had built her reputation out of rumors, half-truths, and the kind of missions where the casualty list included her odds of survival. She had run blockade lines so tight, most pilots wouldn't even simulate them. She'd flown inside a Zorath gravity well and used it to slingshot into their fleet from behind, guns blazing and laughing the whole way. She was, as one alien ace muttered with reluctant admiration, completely uninsurable. She let the silence fall only when she reached the dais. Her boots clicked against the steel, too loud, too human. She tossed her jacket onto a vacant console and leaned against it like she was in a bar, not a council of war. "Cute plan," she said, nodding at the blue arc. Her voice was warm, smoky, and carried an accent that belonged more to dance halls than starships. Stay far away from the scary circle. Shoot from a distance. Hope the bad guys fall for it. Real inspiring. She paused, pretending to consider. If you're cowards, the chamber bristled. The heiress delegate flickered dangerously. Admiral Krell's mandibles clicked so fast they were practically applause. Human, he snapped. Your species is here under compulsion, not invitation. You will remember your place. Oh, I do, Vera said, flashing that smile. The one that had made lieutenants forget their orders and enemies hesitate at their triggers. My place is in the cockpit. At the front. Where it counts. The hologram shifted, flickering as she tapped a control. The blue arc vanished. The maw swelled larger, dragging the grid lines into its swirl. You're all afraid of this, she said. You whisper about it like it can hear you. You fly wide, burn fuel, waste time. You're treating the mouth of the void like a ghost story. She leaned forward, eyes catching the hologram's glow. But here's the thing about ghosts. On Earth, we dance with them. We kiss them goodnight, and then we get on with living. The council chamber erupted in protests. Voices layered in 100 registers. Hissing, clattering, chiming, booming. Irresponsible. Blasphemy. She'll doom us all. Vera waited, arms folded, tapping one pearl button glove against her sleeve until the noise dipped. Then she delivered the line like a gunshot. You want to win this war? You're gonna have to get close to the thing you fear most. And guess what? That's what humans do best. The silence this time was different. It wasn't agreement. Not yet. But it wasn't dismissal either. She had planted the idea. Reckless and electric. It would sit there like a live wire until someone touched it. Enough! Admiral Krell snapped. His claws stabbed the hologram back into its safe arc. Human bravado has no place here. We skirt the maw. We hold formation. Any deviation will be considered treason. Vera picked up her compact mirror from her belt, flipped it open, and checked her lipstick in the reflection of 1,000 alien eyes. Then I guess you'll have to arrest me later. Before Krell could spit another word, the alarms hit. Scarlet light flared across the chamber. The hologram erupted into chaos as red triangles bloomed on the fringe. Zorath's signatures, dozens, then hundreds, boiling out of the dark. The Dominion had been waiting for them, coiled like a serpent at the edge of the abyss. "Battle stations!" voices screamed. The chamber fractured into frantic communication, officers shouting in overlapping codes, admirals jabbing at consoles. The hologram zoomed and twisted as the fleet scattered, arcs of fire already streaking through the void. Vera was already moving. She snapped her compact shut, tucked it away, and threw her jacket back over her shoulder. "About time," she muttered, her eyes alight like a gambler seeing fresh cards. She turned on her heel and strode for the hangar. "Where are you going?" a fleet officer barked. "To show you what a human does with ghosts," Vera said without breaking stride. The hangar was chaos. Pilots scrambling, klaxons howling, ships roaring to life. But Vera moved through it like it was choreographed. Her fighter, an Earth-built relic named Corsair 9, sat waiting, its black paint polished into a mirror, nose art of a red-lipped pin-up winking at the void. She climbed the ladder 2 rungs at a time, boots ringing. In the cockpit, she slid into the seat like into a lover's lap, buckling straps with practiced grace. Her gloves snapped at her wrists, her goggles slid into place, and she painted her mouth fresh red in the tiny cockpit mirror. Ritual, armor, war paint. Outside, the maw loomed on every screen, vast and hungry. The Zorath ships flanked it, sleek and black, their weapons already scything into the fleet. Admirals screamed for retreat, for regrouping, for sanity. Vera smiled, pulled the stick back, and her fighter roared into the black. "Let's see," she said, her voice warm and reckless. "If the mouth of the void can handle a human laugh, Her ship peeled away from formation, breaking every order, diving toward the singularity itself, closer than any fleet ship dared, closer than any pilot sane or desperate had ever risked. Behind her, officers gasped, admirals cursed, and the arbiter of the fleet himself spat words that would be filed in reports as, quote, protocol. But the last thing anyone remembered from that moment was Vera's voice cutting through the comms, sly and fearless. Try to keep up! And then the maw filled her canopy. Black, endless, hungry. She didn't flinch. She smiled. The first thing that goes wrong is color. Color isn't supposed to go wrong. Color is the quiet covenant between light and nerves. You see a star, and your brain says blue-white. You see an alert, and your gut says red. You see a wingtip, and your hand remembers silver. Near the mouth of the maw, color forgets its manners and becomes syrup, something you can feel on your teeth. Vera takes the saving throw through that syrup and laughs. You're inside the outer shear layer, Cutter says, voice steady in her ear. The AI prefers understatement. Radiation indices spiking. Hull temperature is higher than you're going to like. I like it hot, Vera says, and thumbs the interdiction limiters to permissive. The glare shield polarizes. The world turns noir. Gravity, that gentleman you court and insult in the same breath, puts a hand on the small of her back, then remembers it has claws and squeezes. The maw is not a hole. It is a cathedral of wrong. Its accretion disk is a ring of star stuff whipped to froth, a slow river of quick knives lit by the last arguments of atoms. The closer you get, the more it argues with itself about which way time flows. A white dwarf coughs on the far side, and the sound gets here first, like gossip, outrunning the fact. Human vessel saving throw. Someone on fleet-wide scatters their composure and gathers it back up in syllables. Pull back. You are inside the debris hazard zone. And the glow, Vera says, because they don't have a word for what she's seeing. A halo of mathematics made visible, asymptotes showing off like divas. Her hands settle on the stick the way hands find ropes they used to swing from. This is where the texture lives. Pilot Vortex. Admiral Core of the Tessellate clicks, and even his clicks sound anxious. We require you to reposition. Your telemetry is diversely non-compliant. Diversely non-compliant is my brand. She angles saving throw's nose and drops into the upper skin of the disc the way surfers drop in, with a tiny prayer and a joke at physics, expense. The ship shudders, and the seats tell her a story about inertia. She grins like a woman, remembering a lover's name in a language that doesn't allow vowels. The first wave hits like no wave she's ridden. It's not water. It's a field gradient thick as velvet and sharp as a paper cut. The shield bands squeal. The frame sings the note a tuning fork dies on. Her hair, pinned back in a proper bun to make the fleet happy, slides a few stubborn strands loose and paints lightning across her cheek. She tastes ozone and the old penny flavor of hard acceleration. Vera, says Cutter, with that faux polite tone he reserves for times like weddings and apocalypses, the Zorath aren't just chasing us. They're shaping the flow off their bowfields. They're trying to herd. Of course they are. She flicks a toggle. The plasma whip spools up in its cradle. The fleet calls it a gravitational tether system. Vera calls it a leash for dragons. Let's give them something worth herding. A dozen alien voices bloom across command channels at once. The choir of mirrors says something about angular momentum budgets. The serpentiform cadre hisses counsel. A small polite squid from Hydromech hums the universal chord for kindly cease dying near me, muting everything except the part where you asked me to behave, Vera says brightly, and mutes everything. Silence floods like champagne. She's a small bright thing near a big dark thing. The disk is a seashell spiral of infalling fire. Zorath light cruisers prowl along the safer, wider channel, pouring coherent fury into pockets of fleet formation like men salting slugs. Saving throw skates across a ridge of lensing, flips tail first like a gymnast, and Vera flicks her left wrist. The plasma whip spits a ribbon of radiating burn and unfurls into the dark with the insolent grace of a dancer's scarf. Microsingularity, seeds flicker on the line like beads, fields couple to fields. The whip bites a fist-sized ember of armored debris tumbling near the edge of sane space. Gotcha, Vera purrs and pulls. The line arcs. The ember becomes a meteor, because she says so. She whips it sideways into a Zorath assault screen. Their shields are built for beams. They are less elegant when a 30-ton glittering swear word hits them at 8/10 C. The first ship's forward facet flares and goes out like a slapped candle. The second's attitude breaks, and because the Maw disapproves of that, gravity adds editorial comment. The second ship begins to sag toward history. Human pilot is employing improvised kinetic ordnance. A fleet controller says in a voice that suggests they've just witnessed someone tap dance across a minefield and request a second minefield. Vera licks her teeth, checks the plasma temperature, and dumps a little more heat through the radiators. Sparks smear away like lit fireflies sucked into a hurricane. The whip complains in the low growl of stressed coherence. She rotates the ship 90 degrees without warning, because the Maw doesn't care, it only chews. The disk's river grips the hull like a drunk grabbing a bouncer's shirt. Her shoulders roll with it, and the ship obeys, not because it must, but because she convinced it to want to. Do not die, Cutter says, conversational and honest. I won't, Vera says. I like living too much. But if I do, you have my playlists. They are all big band and trash pop, cultured trash pop. And the band is not big, it's perfect. The disc brightens to a sullen brilliance. The shock of a tidal convergence rips a vein of hot gas into harp strings and plucks them. Saving throw vibrates in sympathy. Her screens paint 1,000 moving edges, and none of them are straight. The fleet, bland beige on their standard tactical overlay, tidy triangles and polite arcs, tries to hold formation 2 light seconds out. The Maw turns their straight lines into arcs halfway through the gesture. Thruster pips hide behind the physics of tear and torque. Hurting indeed. Zorath geometry keeps the pressure up, pushing the combined ships along the slope where their captains do not want to go. You're all pointing the wrong way. Vera tells the empty channel she muted. She unmutes just the band, where they can all hear her and none of them can talk back. Look at your trims. Look at your trims. You're fighting drag you can't see. Give to it, then steal back. Pilot Vortex. Admiral Keir says the way you say a proper noun when you're not sure if it's a person or a weapon. You will return to the envelope. We have not authorized. Sweetheart, Vera says, you authorized me when you dragged Earth here. Consider this my love letter. She throws the whip again. The tether flashes like a pink tongue in a dragon's mouth. This time she catches a flat shard of shattered armor plate from some long-dead war. The Maw is the universe's lost and found. The shard is big enough to have opinions about drag. She yanks it into a new path, slings it around a curvature anisotropy like a street racer taking an on-ramp sideways, and threads it between 2 Zorath gunboats. One, offended, fires. The bolt hits the plate. Plasma blossoms like a rose losing its temper. The blowback char burns the second gunboat's sensor hood. The gunboat does that little surprised wobble shared across cultures by ships that realize they've been made to look silly in front of colleagues. Her hair has completely given up on fleet grooming standards. It breaks free, black with a blue sheen like oil on the sea, whipping around her cheekbones in time with the plasma line. She could tie it back. She doesn't. Men who love their math more than their wills have died on less visible defiance. Human, says a mirror choir monitor, who somehow got through her mute. Those mirrors do not believe in doors, only angles. The stochastic variance you introduce is fun, she offers, and slices the channel. Cutter, how's my engine temp? Yours is fine, the AI says. Mine is appalled. You don't have an engine. I have standards. She laughs and lets the ship drop another 10 clicks into the glow. The disk here looks like silk in a slow-motion wind, if silk were made of falling cities. Light bends in arcs that don't exist on nav charts. The stars beyond turn into smeared sequins. You can see your own drive plume doubled and tripled in ghost mirrors. Her human eyes, stubborn to a fault, insist on making sense of it. The sense they make is this: a road no one else sees, a lane under the lane. She takes it. Vortex! That's Ko of the Hydromac, a voice like rain in a split pipe. Your vector is unacceptable. That's the point, Vera says. She unspools the whip and catches 2 bits of nothing in particular, debris with stories. She braids them on the fly, a trick no one but Vera and lunatic engineers on 3 pirate stations even try, and turns the braid into a bolo. It hums like a swarm of bees dreaming of knives. She throws it across a Zorath mind screen and yanks. Mine-like objects that had been waiting for a proper coded invitation to explode get flustered and explode anyway, out of order, in that way that ruins carefully staged malice. The resulting shockwave punches her in the teeth. She spits blood into a rag and keeps smiling because the rag is red, and what else was a mouth for? Suicidal, hisses a serpentiform lieutenant on a quiet, level channel, seeking comrades for shared contempt. Boring, she says back, and doesn't bother to mute. Let them hear it. If you're going to die frightened, at least die in a new way. Her board is a city lit up on payday. Alarms flirt in amber and commit to red. The whip's fuel generator spits a rude letter at her. She pats it. One more, baby. I'll buy you a drink. You do not pay for drinks, Cutter says. You win them. Don't be petty. The Zorath gets serious. A heavy vector shadows the disk's inner lip, and hard shadows the fleet with it. The dreadnought arrives without ceremony. It simply occludes the world. It's not pretty, it's efficient. A wall with teeth, a cathedral built by accountants. Its mass distortion drive coughs in deep bass. Bowfield projectors wake, blue-black and slick as fresh oil. When it speaks to space, it says, go there, and ships go. You don't have to like a tyrant for tyranny to work. New contact, Cutter says, polite, as all good butlers are in the moment they throw you the shotgun. Designation suggests a Dominion flag carrier. The fleet, which had been pretending not to be terrified, stops pretending. You can hear it in the way voices stop overlapping and start stepping on each other. The dreadnought doesn't aim guns. It aims gravity. It pushes. Not much. Enough. It angles the fleet's center of mass just so, and the maw, delighted at the help, invites everyone to slide. Hold your vectors! Admiral Coeur belts, but his voice lacks leverage. Anchors, a choir captain calls. But anchors bite only when the bottom agrees to be a bottom. Brace the young, someone whispers on an open mic, and Vera forgives the whisperer everything, because that is the correct prayer. The fleet begins to skate. It looks controlled. It isn't. Even tiny ships can be continents when enough momentum signs the guest book. The fleet doesn't fall. It yields. Yielding is scarier. Vera rolls saving throw under a curling wave of bent light and points her nose at the wall with teeth. Come on, you ugly church, she says, and opens her hands the way a street preacher opens his arms before he does something illegal and useful. Vera, Cutter says more sharply than he means to, because he does actually enjoy existing. Your current plan appears to be a crime. I'm going to borrow their shove. That is not a sentence, the phrase. Non-extradition treaty can salvage. They don't extradite from singularities. Humor. She throws the whip again, but not to snag debris. She snaps it open and lets it lick the lip of the dreadnought's bowfield. It sizzles like bacon dropped on a car hood in July. Field meets field. Her pit coolers cough, then howl in interest. The whip hums something between a hymn and a dirty joke. She grins with all her teeth. On her visor, the field lines draw themselves in pure neon hunger. Do not do that, says the choir in a crisp collective monotone, and she mutes them before their mirrors get ideas about lecturing her into a smaller person. The whip catches a filament of their shove. She doesn't try to fight it. She lets it drag her 2 degrees deeper into the curve, then jinks. The jink converts push into sideways. The sideways translates into velocity she wanted, but would never have been allowed to purchase. The dreadnought, offended, increases output. Fine. She wants more to steal. The fleet howls. Not with sound. The data stream goes ragged like a choir at a funeral. Zorath's subships dart in and out, nibbling at edges, snapping at stragglers. A hydromech repair barge bleeds coolant and prayers. Vera slides under it and kisses its belly with a magnet seal, and tows it 3 kilometers sideways out of a bad future. The pilot on board sobs into a mic and thanks all gods indiscriminately. "Don't thank me," Vera says. "Thank my petty engine." Cutter does not dignify this with reply. A Zorath Blade Runner thinks it can be clever and cuts across the specific path she needs. She corkscrews the whip and throws it not at the runner but ahead, at empty space that is about to be something. The whip bites what it finds there, a coil of hot dust, iron-rich, nobody's pet. It snaps, yanks, and draws a line in a place without lines. The runner hits the line. The line is a lie. The runner's field budges. Budge becomes tumble. The tumble becomes a lesson. The lesson ends and sparks that thread into the disk and becomes someone else's problem 5 centuries from now when the glow reaches a different sun. She feels it before she sees it. The change in color inside her bones. The maw is nearer. There is a point to which your vestibular system gives up on interpreting which way is down and instead writes poetry. Hers writes a limerick about bad ideas and sticks the landing. Vector solution, Cutter says in his driest shirt. The dreadnought is not merely pushing. It is steering us toward a local minimum, shared with something we do not wish to share. Horizon, she asks, voice low, throat making the sound she uses with horses and kettles. Not quite. A cusp in the potential where falling looks like flying. They're trying to kill the fleet by not quite throwing it in. She smiles very calmly. That's rude. Death should come with a flourish. She takes inventory. Hull Greeking, good enough. Shields, honest liars. Engines, a hymn. Whip, loud, warmed, greedy. Hair, riotous. Lips, cracked, red as a dare. Hands, steady. Heart, a metronome with an extra beat for style. Vera, what? Even you cannot grin a singularity into a suggestion. Watch me. She yaw skids to brush the inner disk, cheeks wet with sweat. The shield doesn't have the decency to evaporate. St. Elmo's fire crawls across her port intake and writes cursive in languages lost to the second dawn. She follows a ribboned edge that isn't there and somehow is, a trick flyer's foxhole through the air, where the air remembers being thin and young. The fleet shows up on her right, a ragged armada suddenly medieval. The dreadnought breathes gravity again. The fleet slides another half-inch toward the black. She opens the fleet band and leaves it open. They can talk now. They'll need to. Vortex. Kier says, clean and hard from somewhere inside his facets, where fear is arranged tastefully. The fleet will retreat along vectors 7 and 9. You will. That's cute, Vera says. That's like telling the tide to use the stairs. She reassigns her sensors to paint the fleet in fat strokes a frightened eye can read. Hey, choir, how good are your mirrors at letting people see themselves the way they could be? What? Do it. Show them a future where they lean with it. Lean with. She snaps. Sing something your children listen to when they clean the house. What? Do it. Sings, tremulous and then loud, the 3-note work chant hydromech kids chant when they scrub the conduits before festival. It slides into the channel like water finds low, connects to 30 other throats across 30 decks where old hydromech hands are doing the same duties they have always done. Because duty is what you do when fear can't be made to sit. The chant isn't pretty. It's true. The cadence is right. Push on the pull. Pull on the push. Serpents, Vera says. You like coils. Coil your lines. Give the drag somewhere to go. Resistance waste. One hisses, but another, younger, makes the coil with his ship like a dancer rolling his hip, and the numbers tell him yes, and he hisses softer. "Engineers?" she says to no one and everyone. "You've got those little thrusters you always argue with command about? Fire them in pairs. Make your ships lopsided on purpose. Ugly ships survive ugly situations." "Ugly," a choir captain begins, flustered in a tone no mirror should hear itself make. "You want to be pretty, join a band." She throws the whip again and catches the afterbirth of a star, a clot of plasma, the color of remorse. She slings it at the dreadnought. It hates that. It devotes a slice of shove to contempt. Good. Less for everyone else. "Vera?" Cutter says, and the way he says her name means he is about to suggest that there will be consequences. Your G-load is a recommendation. It is not. It is when you have the right hips, which you do not. Rude. She blackouts for half a blink when the disc buckles and throws heat sideways, an event no one had the grace to invite her to prepare for. Her hands don't forget what they were doing while she's away. When she's back, the ship is still pointed where she wanted, and the dreadnought is still large, and the fleet is still sliding like a city that drank too much. Dominion Flagship Broadcasting, Cutter says. Standard ultimatum, disarm, surrender vessels. Prepare for clarification. Clarification, Vera repeats, and the word tastes like antiseptic. They'll push us 2 more inches, then pull us back just enough so everyone writes the fear they felt into their bones forever. She bares her teeth. New plan. Your plans are often new. She drags the whip across the dreadnought's shove again, grazing it like a knife along a bully's knuckles. The whip's field harmonics squeal, and then settle into a lower, more dangerous purr. She toggles the micro-singularity beads from 1 to 3. Cutter says Vera, with the grief of a man watching another man choose the wrong tie, but she's not listening. She's watching how the dreadnought's shove changes the disc itself. Pressure ridges ripple like the surface of a drumhead under a child's palm. The maw plays percussion, too. Listen, she says to the fleet. Your instinct is to run flat. Your fear says flat is safe, because flat is simple. Flat is not safe here. Curves are safe. Lean. Give. Take it in the hip. Vortex. Keir says, not yet ready to concede publicly. You cannot expect this assembly to... I expect nothing, she says sweetly. I invite everything. The dreadnought adjusts posture. It deploys a coronal cutter along its port flank, a beam that isn't a beam, more like a sword-shaped opinion. It writes a line in the disk saying, fall here. The line intersects the path of 3 choir frigates and a hydromech tender. They begin to tip. Vera goes the wrong way. She dives closer to the line, closer to the lip, closer to the place where light goes not to die, but to become gossip told in a different bar. Cutter makes a small, helpless sound like a dog who knows the front door is about to be opened and winter is outside. She cracks her knuckles against the throttle, because ritual is bridge building. I'm going to take a very bad step. Defined. I'm going to let it have me. No. Just a little. No. I'm going to ride the slope and throw the whip over my shoulder like a rodeo queen and pull a slice of their push into a spin. Your metaphors are crimes. So are theirs. The fleet sees what she's doing before the words catch up. Half of them scream in 11 languages. Don't. But their throats are attached to hands, and the hands are attached to sticks, and the sticks do nothing, because fear wrote their plan for the sticks. The other half watch like people watching circus practice, and suddenly understanding the rope is attached to a ceiling, and a ceiling means a building. And buildings are meant to be used. Saving throw crosses an invisible verge. The stars stop being stars and become an argument nobody is winning. Gravity takes her face in its hands and kisses too hard. The alarms throw confetti. She ignores it. The whip unspools behind her like a comet tail and remembers it can be a lasso. She doesn't look at the map. She feels it when the shallow curve steepens under her belly and knows if she corrects in the tidy way, she will die in the tidy way. She does not want to die tidy. She feathers her least pretty thrusters. the ones duct taped to a hull plate an inspector once called insulting, and cants the ship until it's a fraction into the pull, and a fraction across it, and a fraction not entirely there for either. Her grin is uncomplicated and indecent. "Come on, you beautiful throat," she tells the maw. "Sing." It does not oblige. The maw does not sing. It doesn't need to. Everything else does, because everything else has an atmosphere to carry song. Vera sings instead. It's not pretty. It's the note mechanic's hum when a bolt that should be seized loosens and decides to be a friend. The whip catches the edge of the dreadnought's shove again, not to cancel, not to fight, but to ask. Field weights shift in the beads, microseeds blossom into fake gravity couples to real gravity, and pretends not to be surprised when real gravity laughs. The whip jerks. Her shoulder flares. She breathes out through it. The whip takes part of their shove into a spin that is not helpful to anyone who wanted this to be simple, and suddenly the dreadnought's elegant cruelty becomes a choreography with one too many dancers. "Fleet," Vera says, with the casual authority of a woman offering a cigarette to a god. "Your move. Your overconfidence," says a Zorath controller who has finally decided that if nobody else will talk to the mad human he will, is going to sweeten the soup, she says, and ends the call. Ko's work chant comes back doubled by other voices that have found, in their shame, they needed something to count. Serpents coil and uncoil like the heartbeat of a young god. The choir, mortified to be learning from a human, discovers that mortification is a teacher with a good right hook and corrects their anchors. "Vera," Cutter says, very softly now, the way you say please without the word, "if you go another micron inward, I know. You don't. I do. You never do. Now I do." She takes the micron. It opens like the last line of a great joke. The world becomes slope. There is no flat. There is only down and across, and down wins unless across cheats. She is a cheater. She throws the whip one last time, wraps it around a knot of empty math, and yanks. The dreadnought's shove spills, slightly, into the wrong bowl. The fleet stops sliding and starts surfing. A choir captain, who has never said a colloquialism in his life, says on fleet-wide, "Oh," in a tone that implies his mirrors have shown him something that both appalls and liberates him. Everything vibrates. Her bones are little bells. Her teeth ring. Her hair is a storm. There is blood in her mouth and laughter in her lungs and Keel's name like a dumb lucky charm against her palate. She says it once, to make the story honest. "Vera," Cutter says, "you cannot hold this vector." "I don't need to," she says. "They do, on her boards, on everyone's boards." The dreadnought goes from instrument to instrument played. Its shove, so arrogant, so smug, so geometrically pure, picks up a hitch in the beat. The hitch propagates. The disk, which is a river, develops a wave. The wave has a crest. The crest is big enough to surf a city. "If you are going to say your line," Cutter says, resigned now, torn between admiration and agony, "say it now, when the microphones are paying attention." Vera takes her hand off the stick. Just a second, to prove she can. The ship holds because sometimes the ship wants what you want. She opens the fleet band so wide even shut ears will hear. She tastes metal and smoke and opportunity, and says the only thing that could possibly be said in the stupid, brave language of her species. "Don't fight the pull," she tells them, and the dreadnought's shove hits the wave she made, and the whole idea of control goes, "Animal, ride it." The black hole loomed like a wound in space, swallowing stars at its edges, pulling every beam of light into its spiral throat. The fleet kept a terrified distance, spread in cautious arcs along the perimeter. The galactic captains whispered through comms, their voices strained, their nerves held tight by discipline drilled over centuries. Every one of them had been raised on the same cautionary tales, every academy manual built around one rule: never dance with the mouths of the void. But Vera Vortex was laughing. Her ship skated along the distorted curve of the accretion disk, the hull shuddering with every brush of warped gravity. Radiation storms painted the canopy in violent streaks of violet and white, curling light into ribbons that twisted across her cheekbones. The grin on her lips widened as her instruments screamed warnings that no sane pilot would ignore. She had one hand on the stick, the other resting lightly on the throttle, as if she were guiding a lover across a dance floor instead of flying a few hundred meters from oblivion. "You're insane," a voice crackled across her channel, a Fraxian captain, rigid and desperate. "You're drawing the enemy toward the singularity. You'll get us all killed." "Not if you keep up," Vera purred, the words rolling out with the calmness of someone sipping champagne at a cocktail lounge. Her black hair, loose now from its careful rolls, drifted around her face with the cabin's rattling tremors. "Besides, your problem isn't me. It's that you've been too boring for too long." On her HUD, the Zorath swarm surged closer. Needle-shaped fighters dove like a spearhead, trying to force her back toward the safety of the formation. Behind them, the dreadnought crawled into view, a fortress of shadow with engines the size of cities, its hull bristling with weapons angled toward the fragile fleet. The behemoth carried a weapon the aliens had dreaded since the first scouting reports, a graviton projector, strong enough to push ships into the black hole's grasp like dust swept off a table. The combined fleet held back, frozen by fear. Vera whispered to herself as she throttled forward. "Let them tremble. I'll show them how to dance." She flicked a switch, and the cockpit's side cradle whirred open, releasing the plasma whip, a jury-rigged gravitational tether system no one but Vera would dare to modify. The luminous coil lashed out into the debris belt that circled the event horizon. She snapped it around a boulder of shattered ice and carbon, yanked hard, and flung the makeshift projectile straight into the path of an advancing Zorath frigate. The impact blossomed into fire. The fleet comms erupted in disbelief. A dozen alien commanders shouted at once, their orderly frequencies collapsing into chaos. "She's weaponizing the debris field," one voice cried. "She'll collapse the orbit." "She'll collapse you," Vera muttered, rolling her fighter through a hairpin curve so sharp her harness bit into her ribs. Sparks arced across the canopy as radiation storms carved electric scars against the shield. She spun the whip again, snagged another drifting chunk, and laughed as she slung it wide into the flank of a second Zorath vessel. The enemy scattered, their rigid maneuvers breaking apart under her storm of improvisation. On the Zorath dreadnought's bridge, officers clutched at their rails. Their leader, a tall figure of obsidian plating and pale, pupilless eyes, leaned forward, studying the lone human craft that danced where no craft should. "Unpredictable," he hissed. "This species thrives in disorder." "Shall we disengage?" a subordinate asked. The commander's eyes narrowed. "No, press them toward the singularity. If they wish to embrace chaos, let it consume them." The graviton projector roared to life. Invisible waves bent space itself, tugging at the Allied fleet like invisible chains. Ships lurched against their will, hulls groaning as they slid closer to the black hole's open mouth. Panic spread through the comms. "We're being pulled in. Our stabilizers won't hold. Cut thrust! Cut thrust!" Vera's voice sliced through the frenzy. Smooth, unhurried, intoxicating. "Stop fighting it!" Her own craft was shuddering, the frame moaning under tidal forces that could have crushed mountains. But she didn't resist. She leaned into the pull, throttled just enough to ride the curve of warped space instead of braking against it. Her laughter rolled across the fleet channel, reckless and radiant. "Don't fight the pull. Ride it." Her ship arced downward, sliding along the edge of the event horizon in a spiral that no alien dared attempt. Fire traced along her fuselage, not from heat but from space-time itself, bending light like stained glass. She whooped, a sound so raw and joyous that it pierced the fear fog that had wrapped the fleet. One alien captain, voice trembling, whispered, "She's turning gravity into a weapon." Another snarled, "She's suicidal." But then a third voice, older, steadier, carried across the channels. Or maybe she's showing us what we forgot. Fear can be outflown. The fleet wavered, frozen between instinct and inspiration. Then, one captain threw doctrine aside. A Zentari corvette peeled off from formation, thrusters blazing as it mimicked Vera's path. Its crew screamed as gravity slung them into a death curve, but their ship held, banking along the same arc she traced. Another vessel followed, then another. Soon the orderly wall of terrified aliens had become a broken scatter of improvisation, each ship dancing on the knife edge of the black hole's hunger. Vera cracked her whip again, wrapping its glowing tether around the wing of a Zorath raider. With a tug and a burst of thrusters, she flung it straight across the warped current, watching with wicked delight as it shattered against its own dreadnought's shields. The enemy formation broke. The Zorath had always counted on precision, on control, on fear. But now their pursuers were laughing, shouting, improvising. An enemy they couldn't predict. A fleet gone wild. Inside Vera's cockpit, alarms howled. Radiation seared her shields. Cracks spiderwebbed across the canopy edges, and sweat beaded on her neck. Her cat-eye goggles slipped lower across her brow, reflecting the twisted light of the horizon. Her lipstick was smudged now, her curls wild from the rattling, but the grin stayed sharp. The dreadnought pressed forward, projector surging with a force that even her daring couldn't outpace forever. Its engines growled like thunder, driving the Allied fleet deeper into peril. On its bridge, the commander sneered, certain the tide would finally claim the upstart human. Vera licked her lips, eyes gleaming as her sensors lit with the dreadnought signal. "Big one wants to dance!" She lashed her whip around a shard of ice, slingshotting herself across its bow in a dizzying arc. The dreadnought's cannons tracked her, firing bolts of searing light that curved under the black hole's distortion, turning straight lines into spirals. One blast grazed her port wing, sending sparks spraying through the cabin. Her teeth rattled, but her laughter didn't falter. "Catch me if you can, sweetheart," she whispered to the Leviathan shadowing her. Across the fleet, alien captains forgot to be afraid. They shouted to each other in a dozen tongues, cheering when a comrade executed a slingshot turn, roaring as another dragged a Zorath raider into the maw of gravity. The fleet had become a storm of improvisation, humanity's chaos spreading like a virus through every disciplined mind. But Vera's eyes never left the dreadnought. She let it chase her deeper, closer, until even her hull began to scream in protest. The view outside her canopy warped into impossible curves. Stars smeared into halos, debris bent into fractal spirals. The singularity whispered louder than her alarms. The dreadnought lumbered closer, projector blazing, certain that gravity itself would cage her. Vera felt her ship shake apart, metal crying under the pressure, lights dying in spasms. Her plasma whip crackled with power, a luminous serpent desperate to strike. She drew in a slow breath, tasted blood from where her harness had cut her collarbone, and whispered, "Time to show you how humans waltz with the void." She flicked the whip outward, snapping it across the dreadnought's bow. The tether clamped like a hook, embedding into its armored hull. Engines roaring, she yanked, not to pull the giant, but to drag herself deeper, closer into the storm's core. The dreadnought followed, inexorably chained to her reckless path. Its commander screamed orders. Crews scrambled to reverse thrust, to cut free, but the pull of the black hole was no ally to precision. The dreadnought's own mass betrayed it, gravity tugging harder with every frantic correction. Vera leaned back in her seat, hair whipping around her face, laughter tearing free of her throat as she rode the spiral tighter and tighter. The fleet watched in breathless silence as the behemoth finally crossed the line, its massive frame tilted, engines buckled, and the black hole roared its welcome. The dreadnought was dragged, piece by piece, into the event horizon, its shape stretching and bending until it snapped into nothingness. The Zorath line shattered with it, their discipline imploding into panic. Cheers erupted across the comms. a wild cacophony of relief and victory. Alien crews who had once whispered about humanity's recklessness were shouting her name. The fleet was alive, because Vera Vortex had dared to dance with death and make it blink. But her victory smile faltered as her own ship groaned. The whip had locked her too tightly to the dreadnought's path, even as it vanished into the void. The pull clung to her, dragging her closer. Her engines screamed, the hull trembling like a body in fever. The event horizon yawned wide, promising silence. Her laughter dimmed into a sharp breath. Fingers white-knuckled on the controls. She snarled through grit teeth. "Not yet. I'm not done." The fleet's celebration fell quiet as they realized her ship was still caught in the black hole's hungry tide. And Vera Vortex's fighter spun closer, trembling on the edge of forever. The black hole pulled at her like a jealous lover, dragging her ship into its endless spiral. Vera's knuckles were white on the controls, her grin finally stripped down to a sharp, clenched line. Warning klaxons painted the cockpit red, then failed, one after another, as the gravitational tide twisted her systems into gibberish. Even her whip's tether flickered like a dying ember. The fleet watched in horrified silence. The cheers that had roared moments ago choked into stunned quiet. Every captain and crew, transfixed by the sight of the human pilot who had flung their enemy into the abyss, now being devoured herself. Some whispered prayers, some muttered calculations, all convinced she was already lost. No ship had ever danced this close to the event horizon and returned. Vera's canopy rattled like teeth in a storm. The stars outside stretched into molten ribbons, pulled thin by the black hole's hunger. Time itself staggered, seconds smearing across her instruments like dripping paint. She laughed once, raw, defiant, just to prove the void couldn't silence her. "If you want me," she whispered to the black horizon, "you'd better learn how to lead." Her plasma whip spat sparks, tether breaking apart as the dreadnought it had snagged was swallowed whole. Free now, but caught in the undertow, her ship shuddered. The hull screamed like a tortured violin, bolts snapping, metal bowing inward. Her hair whipped across her face, loose curls wild in the chaos, eyes glittering with manic focus. The voice of a Fraxian commander broke through the static. "Human! Cut your engines! You'll disintegrate!" Vera licked the blood from her lip where the harness had cut. "Sweetheart," she breathed, steady hands on the stick. "That's the idea. You just have to disintegrate in the right direction." She pulled every scrap of power into the thrusters, slamming switches that sparked under her fingertips. The ship bucked, frame twisting, as if it meant to tear apart in protest. The accretion disk burned around her in violent firestorms, streaks of light bending back on themselves, rivers of plasma folding like mirrors. She saw herself reflected in the storm, a dozen Veras, all laughing, all insane enough to try. "Vortex!" someone screamed across the comms, their voice breaking. "No one survives this." "That's why I'm not. No one," she snarled, and with a mad woman's grin, she drove the nose of her fighter closer to the singularity. The pull nearly snapped her spine as the ship tilted into the abyss. Gravity chewed at her bones, time fractured into shivers, but she held the line. Her plasma whip lashed one final time, snapping around a jagged boulder of matter caught in orbit, tethering her ship to a fragment of the impossible. She yanked, the tether glowing like a sun, and let the black hole's own pull sling her outward. The cockpit went dark. Silence. Then light. Her ship burst free of the spiral, engines flaming like a comet's tail as she erupted back into space. The void howled behind her, cheated of its prize. Her hull was fractured, panels ripped away, smoke trailing in a ragged banner, but her fighter still flew. And in the cockpit, Vera Vortex threw her head back and laughed, a laugh full of whiskey, defiance, and the kind of wild joy that terrifies gods. The comms exploded. Shouts, cheers, howls in alien tongues, some weeping openly, others hammering their consoles in disbelief. The fleet, moments ago paralyzed by dread, now roared like a single living creature, unified not by discipline but by awe. On the bridge of the Arbiter-class cruiser that had once sneered at humanity, officers stared at the view screen, their strict posture broken. One young lieutenant whispered what none dared say aloud. "She outran the void." Another, voice trembling, asked, "What kind of species does that?" Vera's voice cut across the fleet-wide channel, her tone ragged but her humor sharp as ever. "You fear the void because it's chaos," she told them. The sound of her breath came heavy, broken by the ship's alarms, but her words were steady. "But chaos is where we live. It's where we breathe. It's where we win." Her canopy glass caught the light of the accretion disk, as if it were a spotlight, painting her silhouette across the comm feeds. Black hair wild, lipstick smudged, eyes alight with fire, she looked less like a pilot and more like a legend burned into the stars. The aliens who had once called her suicidal now echoed her laughter. Captains barked to their crews, "Follow the humans' lead." Ships that had trembled at the black hole now dove close, dancing along the rim like students copying a mad teacher's steps. The fleet had been transformed, not by strategy, not by calculation, but by the chaos she'd embraced and taught them to love. The Zorath survivors scattered, their lines shattered without the dreadnought. They fled into the dark, unwilling to follow where the humans had just shown the galaxy could go. Their fear was a relic now, exposed for what it was. Vera slumped back in her seat, her grin softer now, but no less fierce. Her fighter's systems blinked in and out, the ship a ruin held together by stubbornness and duct tape. "Well," she whispered to the void she'd just cheated, "that was fun." Silence held the fleet for a moment longer, as if none of them wanted to speak and break the spell. Then the oldest captain among them, a being whose people had never smiled, let out a trembling laugh. The sound was contagious. The comms filled with it, laughter rolling across ships, across species, through every frightened heart that had been chained by black holes for millennia. And Vera Vortex, still smirking through the smoke in her cockpit, thought, "Good. Now they understand." Far behind her the black hole spun on, eternal and indifferent. But it was no longer the terror it had been. To the Galactic Fleet, it had become something else, a weapon, a stage, a reminder that fear could be turned inside out and worn as armor. Her ship limped back toward the Allied formation. When her canopy finally split open to vent the smoke, the light of 100 ships flared in salute. The once orderly fleet now looked alive, vibrant, dangerous, no longer a wall of trembling discipline. They had learned to dance. The narrator's voice rose, booming with pulp grandeur, as if the stars themselves demanded the tale be told. And so Vera Vortex wrote her name across the stars, the woman who taught the galaxy to throw its enemies into the dark and laugh while doing it. The fleet's cheers drowned the silence of space, and for the first time in history, the mouths of the void no longer belonged to fear. They belonged to humanity.